I want to officially welcome everyone to the Stockbridge Library, Museum, and Archives online poetry series. And this series is in its second year. This year, the theme is the refuge of witnessing, which, the theme has become more powerful as world events develop. But I did want to take a moment to both thank John Gillespie, who's the former president of the board here at the Stockbridge Library, Museum, and Archives. And this program was his idea, and he has tenaciously put together 2 years of sharing weekly poetry. So John, thank you so much for that.
Yep.
We're all grateful. And I just want to also thank you, Justen, for joining us. And I'll just say a few brief things about your career as a poet, and then I'll turn the program over to John and Justen. Justen Ahren published his first collection of poems entitled A Strange Catechism in 2013. And 2 of the poems from that book were nominated for a Pushcart Prize. His most recent collection, A Machine for Remembering, deals with migrants and refugees. So again, just really relevant to our theme this year. In 2019, Justen released an album called The War for the Valley, and he has had a varied career. In 2007, he founded the Noepe, did I say that correctly?
Close, Noepe.
Noepe Center for Literary Arts, which he directed for 11 years. And his work has been exhibited at Mass MoCA, has been adapted to the stage, set to music, and commissioned by a dance theater. And Justen is joining us today from Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. Justen, welcome. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor. And it's also a great opportunity to see so many friends here in a Zoom setting. So thank you all for being here.
So thanks, Wendy, for the introduction, and for Stockbridge Library for hosting our show. And Liskin, we didn't meet last year because I was away when you did your session. So nice to see you. And I think Karen, you were on a previous show. So it's always great to see familiar faces. So Justen, every week we start off with the same question. What time is it? No, I'm only kidding. No. Now, where do you find refuge nowadays? Where do you find refuge?
Yeah, so if you ask me what time it was, that's a nice softball question to open up with, because this question, as I said, we had a little preliminary discussion a couple of days ago, but since you asked this question, I've been thinking about it for a couple of days. And there's no easy, I have 2 answers. One is I find refuge in creative expression, whether it's art or writing, poetry, or photography. And I find it in spiritual practice. I should say about the creative expression that too is a practice. So it's really about devoting myself creatively and devoting myself spiritually. I think those are the 2 places that I find refuge, but they're different. In the creative practice, the refuge is more about kind of grappling with what I'm experiencing, seeing what the self is experiencing the world, and trying to communicate that, trying to make something of it that will go out and communicate with others. But the spiritual practice is a much different sort of refuge, because there it's almost like trying to have the self vanish, to remove myself from the world, but really to kind of engage in the world, but not so much in the heat of my emotions, my passions all the time, like, getting angry at the driver, it pulls out in front of me, or getting angry if the line at the grocery store is too long, right? Just kind of that refuge of like stepping back behind the daily things the thoughts and emotions that come up, and kind of just witnessing, what is going on, and letting those emotions pass. So they're kind of different, and they're also entwined, I think.
So let me ask you this: how does I'm always asking how poets get inspiration, or how do things start? So does that spiritual side, that spiritual practice, kind of does that lead to some creative expression? I'm just trying to figure out, not the cart before the horse, but
Yeah.
the horse and the cart. Is the spiritual part kind of a launching pad to make the create? I'm just wondering. I know they're two separate, but I'm just asking.
Yeah.
That's all.
I want to, whatever, if I'm feeling something that I need to write about, I want to bridge that. I want to connect with whatever is, stirring up. Maybe it's a leaf that just blew across the lawn, or a bird singing from the tree, or whatever. And it has all kinds of things with it. It could have memories. It could stir up memories. It could stir up my own feelings of impermanence. So I don't necessarily start out with like a spiritual, it's not like I'm trying to seek something, but I think inevitably, I was just reading Jane Hirschfield, who was talking about the human experience is one of being in exile, or being separate from. And I think that struck me, because I think that's a sense of what happens with me with creation and with the spiritual pursuit. It's always about kind of I don't know about overcoming, but getting closer, or not feeling so separate, feeling so exiled. I think creativity is certainly a way that I can kind of bridge that. But I don't know that it's ever really quite possible. So that's the maybe that's the that's the existential crisis of it all. But for a time in that pursuit of writing a poem, per se, I feel like there is an alleviation, there is a closeness to something, to like life, to the unfolding, to the becoming, to the opening. And that opening, I think, is that opening to something greater than myself, is that, I think that is the experience that I've been chasing for a long time now, maybe forever. Maybe we all are. Maybe that's what life is, just continuously opening and becoming, and opening and becoming.
Nice. And you live in a destination location in Martha's Vineyard. So, during the last couple of years, has there been more of an influx, you think, of? I'm just wondering if people, are they seeking refuge more? And of course, now with COVID declining, I'm sure the ferries are going to be jam packed with people trying to get on the island.
Yeah, no, we had our population went from 16,000 to 21,000 from the beginning of COVID. So 5,000 people more.
Wow.
On with a year-round population. So that's quite a jump. So right when, as in many places, I think many rural places found people who had second homes were coming, and this was no different. People came here to get away from COVID, from the lockdowns, and and they've stayed. So
yeah, same thing with the Berkshires. Once COVID started, all the second homeowners fled New York and other places, and all of a sudden, like the Berkshires, Wendy was like, it was like a summer population. It was like everybody was there.
Yeah,
it's kind of crazy.
It's been the adjustment's been that we just didn't. The services weren't prepared for that, and they weren't prepared for like an off season either. So off season, a lot of businesses would close, but now we had all of these other people who were looking for services and amenities, and it just didn't. They don't exist for the most part in the off season. So it's changed a little, but it's all good.
Yeah. So are there a few poems you can share for us that maybe touch on refuge, or where you got refuge, things like that?
Sure. So there are a couple of directions I could go in. So I thought maybe I'll start with this one from A Strange Catechism. It's the first poem in the book, and because it is a spiritual poem, but the spiritual, the spiritual poems are also the spiritual elements, I should say, are very grounded in the everyday, in the concrete, in the images. And so I think it can be read a number of ways, but this whole book, if you don't know it, the entire book is it's in the voice of a mother and her son, and the mother has lost a child, and the son, who is himself a not more than 8 or 9 years old, is speaks some of the poems, and the mother speaks other poems. And this first poem is the mother speaking, and it's really a story in poems, a narrative arc in poems. It's called Molt. When a soul is ready, it sheds its ghost skin, takes off its clear feathers like a rain. The doctors examine and prescribe to the body, but no one ever says grieve until the heart's faulty core hung in curtains can be rebuilt. Nothing they give fills the hole. Still, my mind holds every dream I had of you, an entire house prepared. The tiles on the floor are cold. The hallway of the maternity wing is fluorescent and cold. I am afraid nothing else will happen. I won't die of this. I'll just go on walking the numb past, missing you, sitting in a chair by the window, knees curled up, waiting for that one bird I grew inside to release his song.
Very nice.
So, yeah, so that poem, that whole book, a catechism, if you're not familiar with Catholicism, is really kind of a series of questions that is designed to kind of bring you closer to an understanding of the divine. And so I set the book up essentially as questions also to be answered, for the son to answer about the experience of being a child and witnessing this mother, and for the mother to answer about, or to ask even about her own loss, and the loss that she was experiencing, the loss of a child. And so yeah, there's a lot of search going on in that book. There's a lot of and there's an exile, there's a distance from that kind of understanding. And slowly, I think, as the book moves forward, there is some solace, there's some answer, though, it's still part of they're still in the human realm, so they're still in the suffering and the struggling. But I think by the end, there's an answer there's some answer for the son in his experience, and there's answer for the mother in her experience. So
when you started that, was that the intent of your writing, or did it kind of evolve into this, dialogue between mother and son?
Yeah, thank you, John. That's a great question. I never know what I'm working on when I start. So this book started because I met a woman in Key West, Florida, who was standing in a parking lot, turning counterclockwise in a circle. And she was there every day. I was visiting Key West because my parents were living there. And so meeting her, seeing her there every day, I started to ask questions about her. Why is she there? What is she doing? What happened? And those questions that I was asking about that started these poems. I started writing these poems every day. And there was a whole nother story, but there was a great freedom, I think. And she's really, I consider, my muse, because I found these really wonderful ways to write that I hadn't been able to write before. And all I would need to do is just come up with a number, like on the 13th day of standing in the parking lot, and I would write a poem. And eventually the title would go away. It wouldn't be the 13th day anymore. It would become something like Molt, but like the title of the poem I just read. And I would just do this day after day, on the 3rd day of turning in the parking lot, on the 460th day. And I generated a lot of poems that way. I mean, enough for a book. But about 2 years into writing this, I realized that I wasn't really writing about her. I was writing through her, and I was writing about my own mother and my own experience. I think if I had at the beginning come up with that I was going to write a book about my experiences and my mother and my loss of my brother, I would not have been able to write those poems, and I would not have been able to write this book. And it's almost as if I kind of had to come at it from the back. I had to go around it. And by the time I was then, a couple of years into it, and I had all these poems, and I realized I'm writing about this. I'm writing about something I've never been able to write about. It's just been too painful. At that point, I already had all the poems. And then I had a few holes I had to write into, which I did. There were maybe 5 or 6 poems I felt like I had to kind of write into, and I would have this. And then, of course, going back and editing, I had to make some tweaks and change pronouns and, such to kind of make the poems, being spoken by the mother, and those by the son, and so on. But for the most part, the book was written without me really knowing what was going on until the end.
Yeah, and what was your, and once again, I know we're just talking back and forth, but,
Yes.
what was your reaction upon realization that the book was actually, basically telling that story that was too painful?
Well, one, it was, I'm not going to be able to publish this book now. I won't be able to put this out there because my mother is alive. And even though the poems have been fictionalized, there's a lot of truth in it. In fact, when I did publish it and I did show my mother, she said, "You shouldn't have published that book," which she ultimately came around on and found the beauty in the book, which, was wonderful too. But the other part of that is that sense of, in a lot of ways, my spiritual practice was developed around in the process of writing this book, like just surrendering to what is happening, to what's becoming, what wants to come through us, like instead of trying to control it. Like I am, maybe I'm just the vessel for this, and how do I get out of the way? How does the I, capital I, Justen Ahren, what Justen Ahren would like to write and say, how can that move aside and let what is larger, or what else wants to speak, so that was a real revelation of just kind of get out of the way and be surprised by what can happen if you get out of the way. So.
Oh, fantastic. So can you share a few more poems with us?
Sure. Wonder if I should read this one, because this is so in this, because this is kind of almost, it's kind of speaking about getting out of the way, but maybe not being able to get out of the way and just destroying poems too. So in this book, in A Machine for Remembering, which I worked on for years, and it came on the heels of A Strange Catechism. And I remember getting to the end of A Strange Catechism and feeling that if I didn't start writing again immediately, even though I didn't know what I was writing, that I might not write. And so, kind of following my muse, the woman in the parking lot, I just decided to start writing, even though if I didn't know what it was, I would write every day, and I would write for a year or more. It turned out to be a year and a half, and I wouldn't worry about what it was that I was making. I would just write. And so that's how I started A Machine for Remembering. Along in that process, I realized the Syrian refugees and the Afghan refugees and the refugees from Africa began. This is the start of the European refugee crisis. This is around 2015, 2016. I realized what I was personally going through, like spiritually, but also what I was witnessing about refugees, about being in exile, about separation. Anyway, that's kind of what I was writing about. I was personally feeling it and I was witnessing it, and that's kind of what this book became. But I was going to give up on the book. I had written maybe 800 or 900 pages of material over a year and a half when I decided that I would kind of start to cull that and make a book out of it and see what I had and make a book out of it. So I was really kind of whittling it down, but I was to the point where I had maybe 100 pages and I thought, I can't do it. This book is falling apart. And I was taking my son to school. He's 15. He was 15 at the time. I was driving him to school and I said, man, I'm really struggling with this book. I don't even know why I was talking to him about it, but it's like, I'm struggling with this book. It's about refugees and I feel like I don't know what's going on and blah, blah, blah. And he says, Dad, why don't you go do something to help the people that you're, writing about? Why don't you go do something for these refugees? So I volunteered. Like 2 weeks later, I was in Greece, working with refugees at a refugee camp and patrolling the beaches, for refugees who were coming by boat. And those stories that I heard there and the work that I was doing there with the people galvanized these poems. They really, they helped me get rid of stuff that didn't belong. And then they really helped give me just they kind of feel the stories that I was writing about, feel the poems I was writing about, feel my own exile, my own separation, and these things I had been grappling with. And so, boy, there are so many stories. Anytime you write a book, and I know all of you know it because everyone here, I believe, has written. Karen, I don't know you, but everybody here has, a book. And so, a book, they change you while you're while you're writing it. They are writing you. So, gosh, that's such a long answer. This poem, Giacometti's Figures, I think maybe illustrates just kind of struggling with the material and trying to make something out of it that will communicate and not sure if it's falling apart. So Giacometti's Figures 1. I begin to work from memory. 3 figures walking along a border at night. Torches moving beyond barbed wire. I can't help them, though I try to move them. To be rid of them, I succeed only in stripping them to matchsticks, standing in the rain. Elongations I've made only more lonely. So, that I think that poem kind of sums up, like, God, have I done, are these poems doing anything? Are they witnessing anything? Are they helping anything? Are they conveying the stories that I heard? Do they do anything? And the reason I call them Giacometti's Figures is, if you know the sculptor Giacometti, he has these thin figures that some of them are very tall, but there was a period in his life where for 3 years he would work these sculptures so small and so thin that he said at the end of 3 years, he could fit everything he had made into a matchbox. I know, and he worked every day. He was like psychotically obsessed with making, but he said he couldn't find what was inside the piece, inside the sculpture, and he would just keep taking away, and they would break, they would fall over, whatever it was, and he'd have to start again. So I was thinking of him while I was writing this whole book. I was thinking of his process and thinking how my stripping away all of this language that I had written over, year and a half, was really very similar to him stripping away, taking away the clay to get at the sculptor. I was taking away all this language to get at these really small poems. From what I had 894 pages, this book is 68 pages, no, 70 pages, so I took away almost everything. Now, all of that, I would say all of that was important work. All the stuff that didn't go into the book, it made, it supported what was written. But anyway, so I think that poem just illustrates, what we're up against when we're trying to create.
Yeah, nice. No, you've really given us such a great description of the creative process that you've been involved with. It's great insight. I think inspiration. So
thank you.
So I want to, we do something a little different this season. I want to just allow time for any of the people viewing today to ask a question before we move on with the rest of the program. You could just raise your hand or unmute, and Liskin or Karen, as I say, don't let the poet off easy. This is the time to double down. Maybe on syntax or grammar. No, I'm only kidding. Yeah.
You could always get me there.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm not hearing anybody. So let's.
I've got a question.
Okay. Yeah.
I always have a question, John.
Oh boy. Okay. Okay. Mute Karen. Mute Karen. Okay. We're done. We're done. Okay. Okay. Go
I'll
ahead.
try to be brief.
Yeah.
So Justin, first, I just have to tell you, you changed my life. You did a seminar online. It was the 1455 Literary Festival in 2020.
Mhm.
And you talked about, oh, I'm going to start crying, about feeling a calling to write and how you needed to honor that. And I've been writing my whole life, but your talk, I started my daily writing practice that day after hearing that talk.
Oh, thank
So
you.
I've wanted you to know for so long, it literally changed my life. I've never been so happy. And
Ah,
anyway, I'm just interested in how you came to being so wise about this kind of thing. I'd just like to hear more about, I'd just like to hear you talk about the creative process and the daily practice and honoring that.
thank you. Thank you. And if you don't, could we be in touch? I'd love to interact with you, email or however. So before we get off, can you get my email? I'd love to be in touch with you.
I will
Yeah, I
definitely
think
do that.
Karen, I think
That-
I've got your email. I could put it
Oh,
together
you've
for you.
so got my email, and I was
Yeah.
creeping all over your website the last week or so, Justin. So
Or you can put it in the chat if that's available too, just you could
Okay.
put yours in the chat and I can write it down and I can email you. But thank you. I mean, just thank you, first of all, for that. What an honor.
thank you.
Your question. I'm stumbling along this road all the time. So there is no, there's no wisdom. There's just my own practice has, I find what's working for me. But I think I will say that I realize that my whole life I have had to make, and that when I am in that process and when I allow that process, that's when I feel alive. That's when I feel, I'm not just alive, I feel in love, and I feel love, right? So that's what I want. I want that in my life as much as possible. And I think the spiritual practice for me helps me keep that in my life. Otherwise I would just go on and I would just go on blindly and dumbly and mutely, doing what I do every day, which is fantastic. But to, go about my landscaping business and raising my kids and being a husband and walking the dog, but to do those things, kind of being mindful and trying to bring myself to a place of like appreciation, gratitude, awe. If I can, doing those things, the more I do that, the more enjoyable my life is and has become. And so my creative practice has just made my life, as you said, it's just been, I've been happy. I'm happy when I'm doing that. And so why not fill my life with that? Who said how we spend our days is how we spend our lives? I know it. Because I use that quote is Annie Lamott. Yeah, I just want to spend my days. If I feel like if I'm spending my days doing something I'm in love with, then I will have had a life that, is filled with love and joy and gratitude. And yeah, so I don't know.
Oh, good. So let's talk about, probably my favorite topic, witnessing. What is that? Well, nowadays it has so many different, I feel like it's, Massachusetts, all the old Howard Johnson's 28 flavors or whatever it used to be. I feel like witnessing is so many, sub levels, but what is, just talk about witnessing for a little bit for you.
Yeah, I thought about this too. Maybe this is something others will chime in on as well, even if they don't have questions. But what I was thinking about witnessing is, it isn't passive. And I was thinking about it in regards to like people scrolling through the news feed or scrolling through Facebook. And is that a form of witnessing? And I feel like that is so passive that I don't know that it is a form of witnessing. I don't know. And so that's kind of what I thought maybe others might chime in on. But my sense is that witnessing is more active, that witnessing involves, we have that, there's the saying to bear witness. And to bear to me is like, there's a weight, and it doesn't have to be negative, but there's something we have to carry along with that person we're witnessing with, or the event we are witnessing, the people we are witnessing. That there's something about, I don't know, a sense of being present with what we're witnessing. So it isn't just a passive thing. And yeah, I think that's about as far as I've gone with it.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. This is something I think, talk about every week. Ukraine, the price of gas, I don't know, fake news. Are we reaching a point where we're kind of witnessing overflow or overdose, that we really, it's almost like there are too many things to witness. We can't take it all in. It's overwhelming, and it really blocks maybe the essential essence of witnessing, just because there's so much noise everywhere. I just wonder what you thought about that.
Well, sure. How can we, a scroll, what do we last? 1 second on each picture, or, a couple seconds? So and our emotions change on each thing we see or read, our horror, our terror, our joy, we're like, ping ponging around. We're just not built. We're not built for that, to take that in. Nor should we be like ecstatic 1 second and, and grieving the next second. I mean, it's just really not, it's not possible. So I think what we do is shut down. It just becomes a field through which we're scrolling, but we're not witnessing anything, because we're just really scrolling and clicking. So, I turn off my news feed. I just can't go there. And it doesn't mean that I don't want to know what's going on, because I do stay informed, but I just can only take it in pieces. And I just know, for me, I'm not doing anybody any good. I'm not doing any good just by scrolling along my news feed and getting outraged. And so I can turn that energy into, say, I think poetry or art is a wonderful form of witness, because there we're grappling with the complexities, the nuances, and we're trying to make of that, something that communicates, something beautiful, or giving it a form, something to hold it. And so
when you were
different.
in Greece, when you were in Greece, sorry about that. When you
That's
were in
okay.
Greece, you were I guess, in the witnessing epicenter.
Yeah.
You were right in the middle of it. How you said, I guess it really gave you a lot of clarity to kind of cut down a lot of the pages into the essence. I'm just wondering, maybe just tell us a little bit more about that, because it seems like it was an incredible. How long were you there?
Just a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, one thing it did was I used stories from interviews. So things that people told me, the events that happened to them I wove those into poems. So I will share a poem with you called Curfew in Pairs, which is really is a story that I heard from this woman, Maya. She was in her mid 40s. She had been a professor at a university in Damascus, and she had fled with her 3 children. And she had made it to Greece. And so she told me, a lot of stories, and a lot of her stories I broke up into other poems, but this is called Curfew in Pairs. And it's really constructed mostly of her story, although I have, I've made a few adjustments, but so yeah, you could say this is Maya's story, Curfew in Pairs. Snow through a hole in the roof. With the last spindles of the stairs, I make a small fire. If I could give my children a glass of milk instead of butcher's paper, boiled potatoes and cabbage stew instead of the citrus ink they suck from receipts I find on the floor of the train. If I could give my children pears and sit with them under the tree.
Wow.
So, one thing that witnessing did for me was it just, well, I think it, I don't know. All I can say is going there and helping in some way, as my son suggested. I think it made me feel less separate. It was one thing to be writing about what I was reading in the news, and it was a whole other thing to be standing on a beach in the middle of the night and taking people off a boat and giving them, warm blanket and water, and then working with them in the camps during the day and being able to have a meal with them and hear their stories. So that for me, that was necessary. It was necessary to make the poems not a work of imagination. I didn't want it just to be a work of imagination.
Well, that's fantastic. Fantastic. So do you have some more poems you'd like to share?
Sure. Well, I'll say one thing, because this comes up so often. I'll only read the end of this poem but I think this is another thing about witnessing. Where is this one? Sometimes we just need to be with another person. We just need our full attention, our full presence with another. We don't have to do anything or say anything. There is just something about just communing with one another, even just in silence, which is powerful enough to let another know that we are there with them, for them, together in this, And so this poem is called When I Need God, and it has 4 different parts. I don't know, maybe I will read them. I'll read a couple of the parts. They're short, but the end of the poem, I'll just give it away, but it's really, you're just sitting with somebody, listening to them, and just giving them that moment of your full attention is enough, is everything. It's not even enough, it's everything. So that's where the poem ends. When I Need God. 1. When I need God, I watch my children sleep, the trees swaying in the wind. When I need God, I put my ear to the quiet book of their heartbeats. All around us is dream. 2. I dreamed the silver buttons on their black coats. Of their black coats I dreamed, the snow falling on the sleeves, resting there a moment before melting. I dreamt of the rifle aiming at the buttons and the silence, the miraculous silence before. 3. I met a woman last night in the square. We sat together on a bench. She fingered the buttons on her coat, her body curled around a memory, a child sleeping in her lap. And feeling her need to talk, I let listening be my service. That is all. I listened. And though I can't say if I did anything more than this, 2 strangers, we were no longer strange, just openings between which God flew.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah. So.
A lot of great experiences.
Yeah. Well, and the thing with art is, the thing with life is that there's always more. As long as we're alive, there's more experience. But when we're then also making art of it, of the experience, we have like this other level of digesting, of witnessing, of making, of giving form to. So yeah, when I started by saying, refuge, I take refuge in the creative and the spiritual, and then saying they're different, but they're entwined. I think that's what I've been talking about the whole time. They're different forms of refuge. Different things might be happening, but the process is ongoing.
So for your creative endeavors beyond poetry,
Yeah.
How does that, what's the spark? How does that get initiated?
Well, recently I've moved into more visual work. I've been doing photography, taking lots of photographs. And I think it starts the way everything starts for me. I don't know what I'm doing for the most part, but I am enjoying doing it. It's play. And I think it goes back to, when I was a child and I would make things, songs, it was so natural to me. I think that I've always wanted to get back to that. I would just ride along with my parents in the car and I would sing in the back seat. I'd just sing everything that was passing by. I'd sing. There's a dog barking in the yard. There's a person getting gas. There's a bike, guy riding on his bike. All of that was, a song. It was like singing the world. It was as it was happening. And I remember that freedom. I would go home and write those songs down and the titles and the day I wrote it, it was March 20th, that I, wrote the song. And I kept that for years. I kept this thing. I never sang the songs, probably more than that one ride I went on, but the feeling and experience for me was, I was involved in creating something. I was creating through me. So I have always wanted to, Karen, this is going to go back to your question earlier about the the wisdom and how I get to this place where however I've gotten to this place, which, and I said stumbling along. I've wanted to get back to that place, I think, in myself, that I was there when I was a child, of that freedom to be able to create and to play. And I think as we get older, who knows what pressures we put on. I put a tremendous amount of pressure on myself to do something that was great or important. I wanted the work to be, whatever. I had so many expectations that it would often paralyze me, to the point of like going away from, I didn't write poetry for years. I quit writing poetry in college and I didn't pick up a pen again for about 8 years. But as I've gotten into my practice, I constantly remind myself that I need to play. This is really what I am doing when I sit down. I don't need to be critiquing anything I'm doing. I just need to honor that moment, as you mentioned before. I need to honor this moment of making. This is the experience. This is the unfolding. This is happening now and it's going to be gone. So that's what I have to attend to. And then, I can craft out of it after. I can make something else after. But in the moment of making, we're just making, and we should just be praising and playing and joyous. Even if it's difficult material, then I guess we're, maybe not, but we're feeling whatever it is, we're feeling it the best we can.
So Wendy asked, did your parents love taking you for rides? Or maybe that, we heard too many songs last week. That's it. No more cars.
That's terrific. I think, probably, I don't know. I remember, I don't know. Maybe I sung under my breath. Who knows? I do remember trying to get my sister to teach. I remember trying to teach my sister to do a Ahren, Bob, 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 Bob. And she would in the back seat, and I would have her come in at a certain point. And I remember getting mad, and my parents getting mad at me because she wouldn't come in at the right time, to do this 2-part. So yeah, maybe they got sick of it.
All right, trouble in the back seat. Here we go.
Yeah. Thank you for lightening that up, Wendy.
Oh boy. So I will also want to just give the audience another opportunity to ask some questions in the chat, or opening your mic. You don't have to, but I think in season 1, it was just kind of a straight reading, and then all of a sudden it was, oh, we're out of time. Go, okay, one question, goodbye. So we want to just let people have a chance to, ask anything. Here we go. Wilda Morris, Trouble in the Back Seat would be a great poem title.
I might have to write that one.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, it's funny you should, I mean, that's great, Wilda. It's funny that this topic should come up because I have been working on a couple of poems about singing in the back seat, and haven't really, they're not in any shape yet, but they're coming. So Trouble in the Back Seat would be a great title.
Yeah, once in the front seat, my dad stopped really quick and I went right into the windshield. Yeah.
I could use that title and write about my children.
I have
Trouble
a
in the
question.
back seat. Yeah.
I have a question, John. Justin, I'm curious what I know you've from before, and you've said it today too, that you don't really know what you're working on while you're working on it. But do you have a sense of what you might be, what next book might be emerging?
I do. And this has been a little bit different process because when COVID hit, I was in France, in Ahren, and all of this, zaniness that was going around. And I was reading these books that were blowing my mind, like Clarice Lispector's The Passion According to G.H. And so at that point, I thought, gosh, I'm going to try to write, this next manuscript is going to be, this, and this about the experience of kind of the first days of COVID. I think it will move on from that, but it is, but yes. So I have kind of intentionally somewhat taken a different approach to this next one. And I'm finding it very difficult, but writing is very difficult. So Liskin, you've probably seen some of the poems you have, in fact, and Katie and Wilda, you've probably seen, some of these coming.
Yeah, I thought that might be where you were heading, but
yeah.
So
Yeah, they have the big questions in there. So that, I'm trying to answer again. It's what's happening with me, what I'm kind of processing and trying to what I'm experiencing and trying to grapple with what I am grappling with. Kind of spiritual realms are coming through in the poems, and the only way I can kind of do those things is kind of, I guess it takes a little while for me to find the concrete images that they can land in, because that takes a while to coalesce, because they can't just be these big ideas. They just doesn't work. So it takes a while for the images for me to kind of really become concrete. And I guess that's where I am now. Yeah. Thanks, Liskin.
I want to thank you for reading the pair poem, which is one of my favorite from the Machine for Remembering. And it has a big idea that listening is the service that's needed, but you did find the right concrete images to put that into. That's really, I think, a very powerful poem.
Oh, thank you, Wilda. Yeah.
So Justin, how about a few more poems here so we can soak up the good wine that is in these words?
Okay, yeah, I thought I would read a love poem. So this actually, there are a couple of these in this book. In A Machine for Remembering, there are a couple of, the book has repeating titles. There are only about 6 titles through the whole book. For every poem, they have one of 6 or so titles. And one of the titles is Things I Didn't Know I Loved, which is after a poem by Nazim Hikmet, which some of you, Liskin, Katie, Wilda, may remember that Jennifer Clement gave this as a writing prompt one of the first days of the poetry workshop that many of us attend in San Miguel de Allende in Mexico every year. So she always, Jennifer, who's a wonderful, she's an amazing writer, poet, novelist, activist. She starts out each session by giving a writing prompt, and we go away and spend an hour, 30 minutes or whatever writing. And so one day she gave this one from Nazim Hikmet, Things I Didn't Know I Loved. So this was I don't know if I wrote this one that day, but I did this. I've done this prompt many times, and I've come up with, you know, different poems. It's a great prompt. So, things I didn't know I loved. Night rain whispering to the earth. The blue-red rain against the windows. I didn't know I loved the rain. My wife's body in bed next to mine, her feet on my feet, the tide of her breath against my own, some of my own pain and my failing in her eyes. I didn't know I loved the many nights it has rained while we have slept in this room, unharmed by the cups of lightning in the window, her heart in my sleep, blooming its round thunder in my ears.
Nice.
Thank you. And let's see. Let's see. What else? I haven't read this one in a while. It's kind of an unwieldy poem. Yeah, okay, I'll try this one. I haven't read this one in a while, so it's always fun for me, challenge. So I think the reason I'll share this, and maybe I don't know, this will be the last one I read. It's about being seen. And so I think in this physical sense, it's about being seen by another, by a beloved, by a lover. But in a spiritual sense, there is I think for me, the sense of being seen by something greater, being held by something greater, and moving towards that as a plant grows towards the sun, just moving towards something so much greater than ourselves we could never really understand, but we are compelled. It's called Fragment, East 2nd Avenue. Something I have lost in forms I must believe. In a book I read once, the color of the ancient sea, starving and cold. I've lived ever since, copulating with memory, hoarding what memory returns to me. Amen. Still, there are things I can't find, can't retrieve, or that I don't know which questions to ask. The crickets that saw me approach the autumn field, the dragonflies hovering at the woodline of burnt oaks. For these, I'm the eyes, the ears, the lungs of what happens. I'm their emotion. Without me, there would be trees, fields, insects, but no conversation about the crimes. Only I bring the past, inhaling self here, self who has known loneliness and has cowered between a wall and a bed, self who has fled and remembers fleeing, who once fell through that lover who first saw me standing in the streetlight, the lover who looked into me and said, I choose you. And in the once greedy night, she took my hand and crossed the tracks. And each time she lost it, paused and took it back. And each time a blanket of dark wings I felt added to my hunger, until she pulled me down onto the roots under the oak, lifted her skirt and put my hands there first, then my face, and then to her face she brought me, then to her mouth, that suffocating petal. The morning train tore past, and a bird began singing for the sun it had been, the longing it had been and was done with. In a book I found once, the color of the ancient sea, starving and cold, something lost. I couldn't find it elsewhere, but I found it here. Amen.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, thank you. Big rambling poem, talking about a poem that you just wrestle. I mean, I just give up on some of them because you can't wrestle them in. And we've had, I actually, Liskin, we need to have a longer discussion because we've been going back and forth in some emails just about how perfect a poem needs to be and what happens if we, can we break it by getting it too perfect? Is it, So that's a good example for me as a poem. I would wrestle with that, and I'll edit that for probably the rest of my life. Every time I read it, I changed it a little bit just since from the page, you know, because every time I read it, it's just never going to be right, and I can't make it right. Galway Kinnell famously edited his poems even after they were published. He would be giving a reading and he'd have a pencil and you'd see him, you know, writing notes, changing words in midstream. So, you know, just because they're on the page doesn't mean they're not in stone. Yeah.
Well, in season 1, we asked a question, how do you know when a poem is really done? And I think the answer was, it's never really done. So.
For me, they aren't. Yeah.
Oh, great. We just have a couple minutes left. Want to just close us out with one more poem before we, and for people on the call, we talked about this is like the Christmas Eve for National Poetry Month, you know, March 31st. So I told Wendy I'm creating a new holiday, and obviously President Biden will have to now anoint this as or the Catholic Church, one or the other. So I'm going to get on that right after this call.
Oh, what to end with? Oh, you know, I'd like something that should have ended with the love poem. Let's see. Sorry, I ran out of things that I had prepared. Sure, I can find something.
Something new, Justin?
I don't have.
Yeah.
Good for you. I don't have anything.
All right, Liskin, good challenge there.
No, yeah, thank you. I don't. I would never, and and I don't have anything in front of me. So
that's fine. It's
you know, this will be a good one, Sunrise, because I love the poem, and it really it's about the woman that I met standing in the parking lot that I talked about earlier. And so one of my first ideas about what I wanted to do with the book, about who she was and what she was doing, was that whatever she did, there was like like the butterfly effect. You know, a butterfly flaps its wings in, you know, South America, and then there's like a hurricane on the East Coast of the United States. This thing that she stood in the parking lot and turned in order for, you know, to make other things happen. So she felt this idea that I had was that she was doing this in order for, you know, as like a gift to the world, so that it would rain, or so that the flowers would bloom or something. And I just kind of took that idea and I imagined, well, what are other people doing that they, you know, might be causing some unseen effect? And I just think I love the poem. It's called Sunrise. The woman gesturing obscenely at the intersection of First and Main, who sleeps on a bench in the cemetery or in the doorway of the church, her blankets covered in bird melodies, is responsible for this morning's frost. And the clouds skirting the orange sky were dragged here by the man pulling a shopping cart full of empty bottles down the alley to his house. Someone shits in the street and snowdrops break through the ground. I'd like to meet the man who makes the sunrise, and the person who lifts the tide, laundering the earth. They must be strong. Water is so heavy and reluctant. It must be a mother in the barrio carrying her feverish child upstairs to bed. And keeping the cooking flame lit there where there is no food, two lovers in a field of sheets. What a gift they are giving, their forgiveness of each other, bringing us this rain.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir.
Oh, I thank you so much.
For a wonderful hour. And I thank everyone for joining. Couple things. You know, my email address is in the chat if you want to be on our mailing list. And then, Wendy, you want to mention the April 9th event at the library?
Yes, for anyone who's local, on April 9th, kicking off our Poetry Month extravaganza. We have a program called Interfacing Poetry, Mental Illness, and Mental Health. And this panel will be a symposium with 4 medical doctors who are also poets, and they'll be exploring these themes of how poetry shows up in their work, but also how poetry helps sustain them doing such difficult work. So it should be great.
Terrific. Thank you.
And Wendy, are you going to record that, or is that possible, or?
No,
Right.
No.
no.
And
Well,
John, and
Justin-
will you be sure that I'm on the mailing list as well, so that I get?
I think you're on the, I think you're in the poets one. So you get something every week.
Okay,
Yeah.
terrific.
Yep.
Terrific.
Justin, thank you
And
so
Karen,
much.
I will do the intro. I got your email. We'll make the intro after this. So no, thanks everybody. Once again, another fantastic hour, and I got to recharge myself in the poetry wall.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Thank
See
you,
everyone next
Justin.
week.
Thank you, my friends. Thanks for being
Okay.
here. So great